Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on first, how to choose your major, how to pick your major, and then second, how to choose classes. We're going to introduce ourselves. If you missed our last webinar, hi, I'm Alina. I'm from Evansville, Indiana. It's in like the center kind of the United States. I'm in the class of 2022, and my majors are English and Spanish, and I minor in education.
Yeah, hi. My name is Asha. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm in the class of 2023 at Notre Dame in Indiana. And I'm studying economics, global affairs, and minoring in digital marketing. So Alina's going to start us off just kind of talking about how to pick your major.
Great, thanks, Asha. So we'll jump to the next slide. First off, what is a major? What does it mean when we talk about picking one? So this definition is from the College Board, as you can see. Essentially, a major is this specific study area where you spend the majority, at least 1/3 to 1/2, of your credits focusing on. It's where you spend the majority of your classes. Here we have a list of example majors from 2019, the most popular ones. So a major can really be anything from English literature, that's what we mean when we say we major in English, to a language like Russian, to history, to finance, to computer science, business management, economics like Asha, digital marketing, right? Really anything that you studied in high school, in addition to really anything you can do as a job, like engineering. Those are all majors, and there's some shades of gray in between. Some things to note about what is a major, what do we mean when we talk about this, is the presence of double majors. So like I said, a major is not all of your courses. It's just 1/3 to 1/2. There are other courses that you might take, which Asha will talk about later. So oftentimes you can fit in another major. You can have two kind of specialties. You might do, like both Asha and I have double majors, you might do something like history and statistics. You might do something more similar like economics and political science, right? So there are all sorts of different combinations you can make. The next step down would be a minor. So a minor is essentially half a major. It is a little specialty that you spend some of those extra classes on to focus in on something maybe you're interested in, maybe something you like to talk about, but you don't want to spend all your time on. So a minor could be something like musical theater or peace studies or gender studies. There are all sorts of different minors. And they can also be things like management or digital marketing, like Asha was talking about. And then finally, smaller than a minor is a concentration. So not all majors and not all universities have concentrations, but they are really prevalent. So I figured I'd talk about them. A concentration is kind of like a minor that you have within your major. So the classes you take for a concentration count towards your major. For a good example of this would be in a major like history. So history, like from the time humans started walking upright to now, that's a huge thing. So how do you kind of focus that a little bit more? You might concentrate in 20th century history, or you might concentrate in American history. You might spend 3, 4, or 5 classes within your major on that subject so that you gain even a higher specialization within your subject area. Okay, so we'll move on. So now that we know what a major is, how do we figure out what ours is going to be? How do we figure out how to get there? The first is to really take some time to reflect and ask yourself about these 3 key domains: values, interests, and skills. This is something that will change throughout your college experience, will change from now to the time you apply, to the time you finish your first year. And so it's important to keep asking yourself these questions throughout your journey. The first is really your values. So those deep-seated beliefs you have, those things that really give your life meaning, right? And that's asking yourself, what matters most to you? So that's kind of at the end here. But what matters most to you? That's what kind of life do you want to lead? What sort of legacy do you want to leave with your life? Is it important for you to help others directly in your career? Do you want a work environment that's more independent, where you work on your own, or more in a team? Do you value that team structure? There are lots more questions you could ask about your values, but I'll stop there for now with those key ones. Then the next step is interests, right? So what do you like to do? What do you enjoy doing? What sorts of events or experiences in your past, in your high school experience, in your elementary school experience, did you find really exciting, really interesting, and really stimulating? And then what sorts of activities do you enjoy doing inside and outside of school? So maybe inside of school, you really like to do derivations of calculus equations. But outside of school, you like to play soccer or play football, right? So these are things you want to think about. Maybe you can incorporate those skills together and those interests together in a major. And then finally, what are you good at? So this is important, right? What's in your toolbox? What can you do? These are not really more like questions you'd ask yourself, but they're sorts of nouns you could list. So you might be really good at research and finding out information. You might be good at talking with others, communicating. You might be great at public speaking. You might be great at math, like I mentioned. And these are all things that you have that you can build upon in your major. It's important to remember that your skills that you have now will grow and change with your major. So again, I'll give an example of math. Going into college, you're not expected to do differential equations 3 your first semester. No one's expecting you to know advanced math, really advanced math, as soon as you step in your door. They're in their door. The school is going to give you the skills you need to succeed throughout your major. So think about, what skills do I have? Not only that, but also what skills can I grow? And the intersection of your skills, your values, and your interests, that's your fit. That's where your major should be, ideally. And then just a note on this is that it's okay if you don't know all these things. If you don't know, yes, I value honesty, or I value academic rigor, right? If you don't know those things right away, that's okay. Your job your first year is to explore. As Asha's going to talk about, your first year is flexible. You don't do all of your major courses within your first year. So if you take Introduction to Engineering your first semester of your freshman year, and you get through it and you hate it and it's the worst experience of your life, you do not have to be an engineer, right? You can change your major, and that's totally fine. We'll move on now. And then thinking also with major about career. So this is kind of one of the most Googled questions, right? What major should I choose to be a doctor or a lawyer or an astronaut, or give me something else, a baker, I don't know, any sort of career you want to do. This is the question people often ask. But I'd ask all of you, as you think about what major you want to choose, is to remember this kind of maxim, right? Major does not always equal career. Major does not equal career. Do all biology majors become doctors? No, right? So biology majors become business people. They become teachers. They become lawyers. They become pharmacists of all different types. So the major you choose as your undergraduate major, as your 4-year degree, will not necessarily be your career. This is especially something to think about when we think about these majors that are designed specifically to get you into a career, right? So pre-med, pre-medicine, because medicine is a advanced secondary graduate degree in the United States. In undergrad, you often take, if you want to go into medicine, you take courses designed to help you prepare to enter medical school and to take the tests you need to get into medical school. This is a track. It can also be an entire major. Some schools make it an entire major, but often you'll hear someone say, oh, I'm biology pre-med, or I'm chemistry pre-med, which means they have another major, but they're taking these extra classes, right, to go to medical school. That is an important track that people do to specifically get a career in medicine. But sometimes you find out that actually I don't want to go to medical school. I finished all these medical courses and it's not for me. And so again, you might do something in business. You might teach. You might go on to do any number of things. Pre-law is another sort of track. A lot of universities don't have this anymore, but they might. So again, law or law degree is a secondary and advanced degree in the United States. So it's something you take after your undergraduate degree. And you might take courses that help you prepare for the tests you need to get into law school, or preparing for that sort of career. But again, that might not mean you end up going to law school. And then finally, there's engineering. So engineering is kind of the most direct example of major to career. If you're a chemical engineering major, you're probably going to be a chemical engineer. But again, even though that's a direct sort of skills-based major where you prepare for a career, it's not only that, right? Chemical engineers also go into design. They also go into management. They also go into business and entrepreneurship. So there are lots of things to think about there. And then just kind of the caveat, life is pretty messy, right? So the thing you major in undergrad might not be what, in the career you think you want, might not be what you do 10, 15 years, 20 years down the line, right? My mother, for example, she let me give this example. She majored in business in her undergrad. She ran a small business. And then after running that small business for a number of years, she decided she wanted to be a nurse. So she went to nursing school. And now she's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So she works with mental health patients. A complete 180, right, from running a grocery store. Life happens, life changes. And remember that the major you pick when you're 18 and 19 doesn't determine the rest of your life. This bleeds really nicely into the kind of question of your values. So again, with your career and major discernment, they often go hand in hand. You want to ask yourself, what do you want your life to look like 5 years after you graduate? What sorts of skills do you want to have? What sorts of experience do you want to have gained? And thinking in terms of your career as well. So do you want to work independently or in a team? Do you want a family already? Do you want to be married? What sorts of things do you need in your major to be prepared for those next 5 years, right? And then this is a question that sounds similar to what I've mentioned, but asking this question, what will you still enjoy 40 years from now, right? Again, it might not be the career you thought you were going to get. You might have gone into college determined to be a doctor, and you end up being a successful business person and, I don't know, designing computers, something like that. But maybe that medicine that you first studied, that health, it was something that was interesting to you at the time, and it's something you still read about and still enjoy talking about, and something that gives your life meaning, even if you're not in that specific career. A great example of this is my friend who is a history major, but wants to be in the nonprofit sector as a publicist for animal shelters. It sounds really interesting. She's not doing veterinary or animal health of any kind, but she already has a job at an animal shelter. This is what she wants to do. But she studies history because it really interests her, and it's something that makes her feel excited about getting up in the morning and learning something new. And then after I've said, don't think always about your career, your major is not your career, I don't want to say that we shouldn't take into account career prospects. This is just to say that we have to often look beyond what people say about majors to learning what actually people with those majors do. So again, the common logic is all biology majors go to medical school. Well, if you actually Google what people do with a biology degree, you'll see that that's not true, as you can see in this next slide, right? So if we look at who gets into medical school, who goes on to become a doctor, 39% majored in biology. That's a lot, right? But there's also a large percentage of humanities and social sciences. So that's everything like literature, theater, history, philosophy, economics, political science, all of those things. Though people who majored in those seemingly non-medical majors got into medical school as well. And then you also have the non-biological sciences like chemistry, physics. All of those are majors are successful in getting to medical school. So that's one thing to think about. We'll move on to the next one. So this is another one, right? If you have a major that people ask you, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to be employed as a philosophy major, as an English major, as a musical theater major, right? What sorts of jobs you can get? As you see, philosophy majors do get jobs, right? They might be in the clergy, they might be lawyers and judges, so they might go on to additional schooling. They might be professors. They also might be other types of teachers, so elementary and middle school, and then finally managers, so some sort of business, some sort of working in that sector. And then my last graph for today is to think about unemployment rates and what actually happens after graduation. So this is from 2010 and 2011. It doesn't take into account the pandemic, and you might have to turn your head to the side to read this. But the important thing here to see is in the green here, those are unemployment rates right after graduation. So if you look at them closely, besides things like architecture, teaching, I think one here is recreation, those have relatively low unemployment rates after graduation. Most of them are pretty similar. And one thing I want to highlight to you is computing and mathematics, which is often, held up as a great major. You're going to have great job prospects. You're going to work in Silicon Valley. You're going to have plenty of jobs. The unemployment rate after graduation is very similar to the unemployment rate of students who major in the humanities. So that's literature, history, philosophy. And the unemployment rates of people who major in the social sciences, economics, social science, economics, political science, sociology is also very similar. So those majors that often get a lot of critique as not being practical, you can see that really the prospects are very similar across the board. Okay, and then moving on into kind of the last parts of this, I just wanted to highlight some very unique majors. So I've been talking about sort of your standard ones that any university will have. Any university will have computer science, history, literature of some kind, economics. But these are some very specific ones. So we've got puppet arts, puppetry from the University of Connecticut, toy design from Otis College of Art and Design. I believe that's somewhere in the West Coast, maybe California. You can major in Egyptology at Brown. You can major in poultry science, so specifically looking at chickens and ducks and that sort of thing at Texas A&M. And you can also major in equine studies, so studying horses at Becker College. If you want to do something like this, something kind of out of the box, if you have a real strong passion for one of these fields or any number of fields, they're not going to have them at every college. So that will be an important part of your discernment process for your college, looking up what sorts of universities have puppet arts if I want to be a puppeteer, right? I think it's really only UConn. I think it's only University of Connecticut, but that's something to take into account. And then finally is just, you're not alone. Your university knows that it's hard to pick your major. If you go onto any university website and click on majors, academic disciplines, you're going to get a list of 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 for each college within a university, each school within a university. So there's a lot to choose from, but you have all sorts of resources to help you. You have academic fairs, your own academic advisors and counselors who are assigned to you your first year of the university. You have career centers of all different kinds. Here you can see one at Princeton that help you to figure out, okay, let's say you do really want to be a doctor. What sorts of classes and majors do you need to have in your undergraduate to prepare for that? There are major information sessions. So each major might host a call-out session where they explain, now what is an economics major? What do we do? What do you have to take to be an economics major? And then finally is just talking to other students at your university. So what is it like to be a computer science major? What sorts of classes do you take? What sorts of professors you should include in thinking about your courses? So those are all great resources for you to remember that you're not alone. This is a long process, and it's okay if it gets a little bit messy. Okay.
Thanks, Alina. So now we're going to kind of talk about choosing your courses. So this can go either way. You can either choose your major and then choose your courses based on that, or just look up a course catalog and say, this one sounds interesting, this one sounds interesting, and see what majors they go to that way. So it's very versatile in that way. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the different types of courses that most universities offer. This is just a general overview. So first, kind of on the ladder, we have college equivalents. So a lot of US high schools have AP classes, and a lot of more international schools maybe have IB courses, if any of you guys have taken any of those. These count as most of the time for college credit, but maybe not count towards your major. So they'll help you graduate, but you might still have to take a class at your college for your specific major. So that's definitely something to think about. And then if you haven't taken any of these types of courses, don't worry. They usually accept a lot of high school courses as prerequisites, so help you get into a certain course or program or a higher level class. That's what a prerequisite is. Or a lot of the times universities offer placement tests. So you go in, sometimes they're online, sometimes they're right before school starts, and they give you a Spanish test. And if you score a certain number or level on this Spanish test, you don't have to complete the language requirement, or you might get to take a higher level class instead of starting out at the completely basic one. So placement tests are super helpful in kind of either getting your prerequisites for a certain class, or entering a class that you want to enter. So next, kind of university requirements, sometimes known as core curriculum or general education classes, also known as gen eds. So typically these are 1/3 to 1/2 of all of the classes you're going to take, and they're very foundational. So a lot of the times you'll have to do one writing class, one math class, like one science class, just to kind of cover all your bases, so that way then you can move on to your major classes. And also the degree and major you pick and the school you choose to study in. So if you're a biology major, you're going to be in the School of Science usually. If you're a finance major, you're going to be in the business school. So the school that you're in also affects the type of general education requirements that you're going to have to take kind of throughout your college career. So then next, after your gen eds, kind of getting more specialized, you have your area of study classes, so your major, minor, concentration classes. And this is going to end up being kind of similar to your gen eds, about 30% of the total classes you're going to take. And these, usually you have prerequisites, kind of lower level major classes that kind of get you to the higher level of study major classes that are really specialized, really interesting, and kind of go above and beyond. And then lastly, when you're kind of picking your classes, there's most of the time, depending on your major, if you're a double major, you're probably going to have a little bit less room, but everyone I know has space for electives in their schedule. So electives, free electives, is basically something that maybe doesn't count towards a prerequisite, the core curriculum, or your major classes. It's just free. Like, you just get to pick whatever you want. And sometimes taking these free electives your first year at school can help you decide what kind of major you want to look into. So my freshman year, I took a political science elective, a sustainability elective, and a Chinese elective, actually, because at that point I thought I wanted to be a Chinese major. But then kind of as I picked my major, economics, those classes didn't end up counting towards my major or anything, so they just ended up being elective courses that helped me decide my major. So those courses, as I said, don't count towards my major, but they do count towards the general credit requirement that I need to graduate. So they're not just useless. Even if you take all of your major classes, you're going to end up having to take some electives just to meet this minimum credit requirement that you need to graduate. So definitely something to think about when you're looking through your course catalog or any sorts of resources like that. So kind of along the same lines, how to choose your courses. So most universities, 95%, have semesters, which students typically take about 4 to 5 or 4 to 6 classes, depending on what the requirements are. Take 4 to 6 classes a semester, but some universities do have the quarter system, which means that basically the year is split up into 4 parts instead of 2 parts, and you take 3 to 4 classes a semester, but then you end up taking more classes overall because it's split up into 4 parts. So I guess just something to be aware of. Most of your universities probably won't have the quarter system, but looking at the semester system, looking at courses for that. So every university is going to have a course selection catalog. Most of the time it's online now, so you can put in filters and kind of figure out what you want to look at when choosing your courses. But some still have the analog kind of paperback books that you're going to need to look at for courses. So a good way to pick your courses is to talk to your academic advisor. Sometimes they're called different things. Sometimes it's called like a dean of students or student advisor or counselor, something along those lines, but they're going to be assigned to you at the beginning of the year, and they basically know all there is to know about choosing classes. So if you say, I'm interested in this and this, they can help you pick some classes, maybe steer you on the right track towards a major. But I would definitely recommend trying to meet with them before registering for classes. So that way, if they have any like really good recommendations, they say, I want all my first year students to take this class. The professor's really great. The students really love it. Then you'll know that kind of inside information before you register for classes. And like I said before, if you're browsing the course catalog, maybe you don't know your major yet, you're just looking for classes that you like, you can usually they have a description in the catalog, but you can also contact the professors to learn more about the course and maybe help you get into the course if it ends up being full by registration time. And another way to choose your courses is a lot of the times for like a very basic course. So let's say like Calculus 1, which you need for a lot of like business, math, science majors. They'll have a lot of different professors teaching the same course. So for this, kind of going off what time you want, you can also go off what professor you want. So there's this website called ratemyprofessor.com, and you basically put in the name of your professor, and it's kind of like Yelp. It gives you reviews that other students have written about that professor. So do they give a lot of homework? Are they a good grader, an easy grader, a tough grader? Do they have a lot of reading? Do they cold call on you in class? Which basically means nobody raises their hand. The professor just picks someone who looks scared enough, and then that's who has to answer the question. So that's a lot of a really good way to kind of pick a professor and a course before you register. So next, class registration I've kind of been talking about. Basically, it's a time before the beginning of the semester. Usually you have assigned time slots where you log in and you choose your classes for that semester. So if you get a login time, try and sign in at like the earliest part of the login time. Sometimes they'll give you like a whole day to register. Try and register as early as you can. So that way classes that you want maybe won't fill up. But if they do, it's always good to prepare kind of a backup schedule or backup classes at the time of your registration. So as I said before, semester schedule has 4 to 6 classes. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with credit hours. It's kind of a weird way to do it. A lot of times your major or graduation requirement isn't counted in terms of classes. It's counted in terms of credit hours. So each class is typically worth 3 credit hours, but depending on how often they meet or how hard the coursework is, it could be worth more or less. So that's kind of why majors and graduation requirements are structured that way. So say you have like a physics lab or like a physics class, that's going to be a lot more coursework than like a 30-minute class that meets like every other week. So the credit hours are going to obviously differ on those two. So it's just something to look at when you're registering for classes, how many credit hours they're worth, because that usually kind of would give you an indication if they're anything easier or harder than the normal 3 credit hours. So my one requirement to most freshmen is to try and get your requirements out of the way, so your core curriculum gen ed classes. And this way you can kind of, maybe if you don't exactly know what your major is, you can explore a lot of different fields at once with your general requirements. Or if you do know what your major is, it'll give you more time in your final 2 years at university to really focus in on your major. So you can only take your major classes and really be zoned in on that towards the end of your college career. So basically, with class registration, you're going to create your own schedule. A lot of the times, departments for your majors, so like the Department of Economics or the Department of Psychology will have something like this picture on their website. So it's suggested for your plan, which is also really, really helpful when creating your schedule and figuring out what classes you want to take. So you can kind of see here that they've planned out the schedule for all 4 years, and for any semester classes they recommend taking at a certain time. And obviously you don't have to follow it exactly, but it's just a really good guide to kind of know what classes they want you to take when. And so that's kind of another one of my recommendations, is to create a 4-year plan, probably based off of the suggested 4-year plan, but tweak it however you want. Maybe make room for study abroad or any sorts of other tweaks you need to make that way. And in your 4-year plan, or even just planning for your first or second semester, make sure you balance the types of classes you sign up for. And what I mean by that is try not to sign up for maybe 5 English classes at the same time or social science classes at the same time, because then come finals or come midterms, you're going to end up having to write 5 essays all at the same time, which nobody really wants to do. Or try not to take all your math classes at the same time, because then, things overlap. You might get confused. You're going to have 5 problem sets due on the same day. So try and balance these classes as best you can, kind of switch up the types of classes you're taking in this way, so you don't get too confused or have too much work on your hands at one given point. So after class registration, classes start. You think maybe, hey, my friend told me about this class that sounds cool. I think I could handle one more class. Or I really don't like my intro to engineering class. I don't even want to be an engineer anymore. The first day scared me. I don't want to take this class anymore. There's something called an add drop window. Usually it's within the first couple weeks of the semester. I'd say 2 to 3 weeks of the semester. And any time before that, you can add another class to your schedule or drop a class kind of without any penalty. So if you decide to drop a class after this add drop window, then it's going to show up in your transcript and just a bunch of stuff like that you don't really need to worry about. But if your class schedule come the start of classes isn't final at all, you can tweak it based on professors or times and things like that. So try not to stress too much about your class schedule or class registration because you can always change it. And another good thing to note kind of when you're scheduling your classes is to know yourself. If you are not going to wake up for an 8 a.m. class and you're not going to wake up for an 8 a.m. class, try not to schedule yourself an 8 a.m. class, no matter how much you may want to take that class, because you'll just end up regretting it later. Some people are morning people, and if you're a morning person, take the 8 a.m. classes. They're going to be less full. The professor will spend more time on you, and you'll really get the material. But if you're not a morning person, you just kind of have to know yourself and know that that might not be the best choice for you. And so kind of concluding all of that, That is the end of our presentation on college majors, college courses, things like that. So now Alina and I will kind of be open to any questions, either about our majors, what we've heard about other people's majors, or some interesting classes we've taken, kind of really anything you want to ask us, we're totally open for. Okay, so I'll read this one out loud. Is it too difficult to change majors in junior year? What if they are very different? For example, change from biology to business. So I'll kind of start us off. A lot of universities, their deadline to declare a major, any major, is sophomore year. So before then, you can be undecided kind of as your major, but they usually make you choose by sophomore year. But then after that, you can obviously change whenever you want to. But if they are very different, you're going to have some problems because, like I said, the general requirements for different majors in different schools, so biology and business are in different schools, so they're going to have different general education requirements as well as different major requirements. So essentially, you'd have to complete the whole thing over again instead of, say, staying within the same school. So changing from biology to chemistry, your gen ed classes are going to be the same, so it's going to be a lot easier to make that switch. But a lot of people choose to do an additional semester once they realize that, hey, maybe this isn't for me, tacking on a semester at the end, or even supplementing their major with a minor that they're more interested in is always a good way to go.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add. I would say that maybe your junior year, completely switching is a little difficult if you want to graduate in 4 years. So if you add a semester or take classes during the summer and winter, as Asha mentioned, that would totally work. I have known people to completely switch their major after sophomore year. So I had a friend who went from computer science, which is in the College of Engineering, so it's an engineering major, to a mathematics major in the humanities college, so in the College of Arts and Letters. Completely different requirements, completely different skill sets, and she did it just fine. You can also potentially add a second major during your junior year. I had a friend who added the English literature major to his biology major during his junior year by just taking a few extra courses over the winter and the summer. So that might be an option to just add a major, which means you don't have to do the entire, like Asha was saying, the school requirements. Again, you just get to do those particular major requirements, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it looks like we have another question here. Do you need to pay more if you study 2 majors or more than 1 major?
No. So typically at a university, you're paying by the credit hour as Asha mentioned, or you're paying tuition, which is, tuition and credit hour payment are pretty similar, or you're paying for kind of just taking the number of classes you want a semester. So there are 2 different ways of paying. If you're paying by credit hour and you want to do an additional major, you might end up paying more because you're going to have to take a few more classes. But in general, you don't have to pay more because your second major or your minor classes are part of those, like Asha was saying, those general credits that count towards graduating with a bachelor's from that university. So if you need, 120 credits? What is it? Do you know? 130?
So it's 8 semesters. They recommend you take usually 5 classes a semester, I think. So I don't know what that comes out to in credit hours.
Anyway, whatever the number might be, Those will count towards the credits you need to graduate, and it'll end up balancing out where you don't have to pay more. I think that was probably a long way to say no.
Yeah, usually no.
Oh, great question. What are some of the required classes during freshman year?
Yeah, Alina, you can start kind of some of the classes you took freshman year.
Yeah, so normally there'll be something like a writing or English literature class. There'll be a philosophy class of some kind, generally, especially at liberal arts schools. You, like Asha said, will have a science or a mathematics or both, and some sort of history or social science in that field. You might also have a seminar class, so just kind of any topic, but the idea is take a seminar, learn how to talk to other people and give presentations and that sort of thing. These will also depend on the type of university you go to. So if you go to a liberal arts college, you might have additional requirements in history or in philosophy. If you focus on engineering, you might have less of those types of classes and more science general education requirements.
Yeah, kind of as I said before, it definitely depends on what school you're in. If you are undecided, then it's just the university requirements, which, as Alina said, are just kind of general social sciences, like some basic form of math, more general university requirements. But if you know your major, or not even your major, the school you want to study in, so say you're in the School of Science, a lot of the times you have to take like intro to biology, intro to chemistry, intro to like life sciences. It's a lot of intro to classes that end up being part of your freshman year courses, which is really good, taking like the intro class of your freshman year because it's full of freshmen. Sometimes you don't have to take them your freshman year, but people choose to because it's full of freshmen, and that's, you can make study groups, you can meet people. It's just a lot easier that way. But other kind of degrees, you study different things. So I'm trying to think. Engineering, usually they don't have to take as many of the liberal arts requirements freshman year because the engineering major is already so packed full of classes that kind of taking any additional requirements outside of that is like, it's way too many classes. So a lot of the times engineering majors don't have to take like language classes or like philosophy classes, seminar classes. Yeah, usually they don't have to do those, but most other majors do. I'm trying to think what classes I took. Like an energy class my freshman year that ended up being like a physics requirement. It like checked off my physics requirement. So that ended up working out for me. Like I said, I dabbled in Chinese because I thought that's what I wanted for my language requirement. And now I'm actually studying Spanish now. That's why I get to do this wonderful internship. But I ended up switching my language requirement from Chinese to Spanish. Some other classes I took, a lot of people take calculus 1 or 2 their freshman year. That's just kind of a general requirement.
I took, for my math requirement, I took logic. So I took math with no numbers.
English major.
Yeah, math with letters in it.
Yeah, for my economics major, I had to, you have to either place out of calculus 1 or take calculus 1 your freshman year. So that's kind of what I was talking about with the placement tests and the prerequisites. If you get them from your high school or from the placement tests, sometimes you don't have to take some of those required classes freshman year, and you can get a jump start on your major, which is really, really cool. Yeah, but great question.
Do you always have an assigned advisor to help you choose your classes? Yes. So different universities will do this in different ways. It might be based on the alphabet. So every student with the last name starting with A through H will have one advisor. It might be based on kind of desired majors. So everyone who wants to major in a humanity might have a certain advisor. But normally you will get assigned these or be made aware of these at the beginning of the year in some capacity.
Yeah. And so a lot of the times, kind of your freshman year, they do this at a lot of schools, and it's just a freshman year advisor. So sometimes you will just express your preferences to your freshman year advisor, and they will pick the classes they see fit for you. That's typically at smaller universities where advisors have times for things like that. But at a larger school, you have to kind of take the initiative yourself. So they send you your registration time, and you have to set up a time outside of that to find your advisor, meet with your advisor, talk about any classes or majors or things like that. A lot of the times, universities don't set up times for you to meet with your advisor or really even tell you your specific advisor. They're just like, you can contact your academic advisor about this, but then you have to do the research to figure out if it's by major or by letters, things like that. But I don't know of any sort of curriculum or school that you wouldn't have an assigned advisor.
Yeah, and if you just Google academic advisors and then the name of your university, the website will come up that tells you the email and the name of the advisor that goes with your last name or your intended major, that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
If I take classes in the summer, will I be able to graduate sooner? In general, yes.
Yeah, so, pretty much.
Unless you're taking classes in the summer to complete an additional major or complete additional minor, that otherwise you would take an additional semester to do, you will be able to graduate sooner.
Yeah. So a lot of, or sometimes schools have kind of accelerated programs. So if you wanted to graduate in 3 years or 3.5 years, you talk to your academic advisor about it for sure. They can help you test out of classes, pick the best classes for your major, so that come summer, they don't offer every single class, so that in the summer you'll be able to take the classes that are offered that are best for you to graduate sooner, if that kind of makes sense. And a lot of the times at larger universities, they'll have summer terms and winter terms, sometimes called J terms, that really, really condense a class into maybe like 3 or 4 weeks in the winter. And a lot of students take those classes either for their minors or to graduate sooner, and those are both really, really good options.
One just small note on that, though, often you can't get financial aid for summer classes. So that's one thing to think about before you sign up for them.
Yeah, usually you will have to pay an additional money in tuition to take J-term classes or summer classes. That's a really good note. Okay, and then this question is asking about what happens if you're not getting good grades your first semester. So, like, obviously it's an adjustment. It's really, really hard to start these college classes, and especially your first semester, you might not be used to like the format of the classes, maybe the style the teacher expects your writing in, just like little things like that. So for those kind of things, obviously try to turn it around as quick as possible. Tutoring centers are a really, really good service that is offered. A lot of the times it's either offered through like the department, so specifically your major, or just general tutoring, or like an upperclassman could tutor you in a specific class. Those are really good options. And also talking to the professor about your grade, because they know your grade. Like if you said, hi, like my name is like this, and I was wondering if there's anything you could do or anything like you would recommend for me to kind of turn this around. This is kind of what I mentioned before in our previous webinar. If you go to professor's office hours, that's a really, really good time to get extra help. in classes. So making note of professors' office hours, maybe that first week of school, that's where you can go to extra help, and the professor can refer you to students who are tutors, or they can help you with a problem or an essay kind of right then and there in their office. So definitely going to office hours is a really good way to kind of turn that around.
And I just add to that great response that remember, it is an adjustment in your first semester. So if you're, let's say, applying to graduate additional schooling after undergraduate, when they look at your transcript, when a law school or a medical school looks at your transcript, and they see a kind of dip in grades in the first semester, but an increase in the second and third and fourth, they see that you put the work in, that you made up for that deficit. And that shows them a lot about your academic character. Secondly, if you're worried about, will my GPA that was really destroyed by my first semester, will my GPA affect my job prospects? One thing to remember is that, in general, it won't, but one thing to remember is that on your resume, you can put just your major GPA. So just the GPA you got in the courses that you wanted to take, right? So if you got a C in philosophy and it really tanked your GPA and it really makes you upset, you can have that adjusted, just major GPA on your resume, and that will help you out there.
Yeah, also kind of speaking to GPA a little bit, it definitely is easier to have a higher GPA if your GPA starts high in your first semester. It's a little bit more difficult if it starts lower to bring it up, but that's definitely not something to be intimidated by. Kind of as Lena said, jobs understand that, an increase in GPA is obviously way, way better than a decrease in GPA. Like, it speaks a lot to you and your ability to work hard and kind of figure out what you want to study. Yeah, I think that was a really good question. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that was our last question. Thank you all for your amazing questions and your attention to this webinar. We're so excited to have gotten to share our experience with you today, and we'll see you Thursday?
Yes, 2 days from now, I believe. And yeah, that one was going to be on campus life and kind of safety precautions, things like that. So we hope that you'll join us for that webinar as well. And I guess
just briefly on summer classes feel in terms of work. I've taken a few summer classes. They do feel intense, but again, you might be spending 4 or 6 weeks in them. So it's a lot less pressure. It's a lot less time. So there will often be smaller assignments and you'll get done with it really quickly. And the other thing is you can often work and take a summer class. So it's not impossible to do that. So there is a good balance there.
And then we also have a webinar on jobs, internships, and summer activities in general, and that's going to be July 13th. So join us for that one as well.
Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Yes, thank you, guys. Bye.